The AIDS Connection by George E. Vandeman. Copyright 1986. Chapter 1. On a Friday night. It was on a Friday night that I shook my fist at God. 5 minutes before it happened, you would have written me down as a decent, respectable, promising young man with drive and dedication and, well, going somewhere. But inside I was a riot. I was revolt and rebellion and civil war and guilt, all rolled into a bored, frustrated kid, generation gap and all. My father was a minister. I don't mean the kind of minister who marches in parades and preaches politics and goes to jail for causes he believes in. Not that he would not gladly have followed his conscience to prison if there had been a need. But things were different in those days. Concern for people was not concentrated in the streets. But my father understood people. He helped people. He won people. And I watched and I listened and I was deeply impressed. I learned even before my teens that sermons do not come from mental discipline and wide reading and scholastic achievement alone, however essential these may be, but from life. There wasn't a trace of phoniness in my father or in my family or in my home church as far as I can remember. That was one problem I did not have. Rather than being turned away from religion by people who didn't live it, I was constantly being drawn back to it by the compelling demonstration of God's power to change lives. Drawn back, I say, while I was trying desperately to escape. You see, I had this hang-up about freedom. If you think it originated in the 60s or early 70s, you're mistaken. Just like kids today, I didn't want to be restricted. I didn't want to be fenced in. I didn't want to be inhibited. I wanted to make up my own rules, and as a minister's son, I was being watched, and I didn't want to be watched. And it was more than that. Early in my teens, gnawing away at my restless mind, came the first faint suggestion that God might someday call me into the ministry. I confess that the idea surprised me, and it was to surprise those who knew me even more. These were convictions I was determined to stifle. However appealing my home background and however insistent God's call to my heart, I determined to silence the inner voice and discover life for myself. I tremble to think of what I so narrowly escaped. No, there were no brushes with the law. There was nothing in my conduct revolting to society or even embarrassing to my family. No scandals to live down. I know now that conversion is easier for a man whose sins are etched in deep scarlet. Such a man, unless he has silenced the voice of God in his heart, knows where he stands. He knows he needs God. I didn't. I was gripped by something worse than scarlet sin. Mine were respectable sins. I was lost in the church. And don't let anyone tell you that it can't happen, because it can. Please believe me. It is altogether possible to accept a theory, to be satisfied with a form of religion, and yet be lost in the church. I think that was the real problem. Religion, at least my experience with it, seemed to be very weak on the how. And of what use is a religion that doesn't work, that does not satisfy? So I rebelled. What else was there to do? I took up with every respectable symbol of rebellion, those that were in at the time. I'm thankful that chemical rebellion wasn't popular. I became so weary of boredom and defeat that I tried to run away from conscience. But thank God, conscience, unless you kill it, will never let you go. God did not leave me alone, though I wanted to be left alone. Like a man who has taken too many sleeping pills, I needed to be walked and walked and walked, and God was right there. And it made me uncomfortable. I didn't want him that close. I felt like global war inside, and the war was not de-escalating. Finally, I could stand it no longer. It was Friday evening, and I was seated in a meeting where my father was speaking. There he stood, my ideal of a minister, my ideal of a man. He was speaking to the entire congregation, not to me in particular. but every word he said cut like a knife. I got up and walked out of the meeting and moved restlessly into the shadows. I shall never forget those moments in that still summer evening, looking up past the trees into God's own sky. I actually shook my fist at the heavens and said, "Holy Spirit, leave me and don't ever come back." Thank God that prayer was never answered. But breathing those words, the shock of having said them did something to me. At least the words were prayer, though bitter in their defiance. This was the climax to a long series of events in which the tempter had been overstepping himself. I had been doing things that surprised even myself, and now by my own defiant words I was thoroughly shocked. For the first time I saw the fine print on the devil's contract, and I decided to break it. Little did I dream that I was standing on the threshold of a transforming experience that would dwarf all my former visions of personal happiness and satisfaction. I was to learn a secret that would not only change my own restless soul, but would do the same for any man who is secretly longing to know. And that is just what I want to share with you in these pages. Not just my own story. Rather, growing out of it, building upon its discoveries, I want to introduce you to my Lord. I want to talk with you about some of the questions that so perplexed and confused and haunted me until I found the way out. I want to do this because I know that the questions that tapped so insistently in my mind must have tapped at your mind too. For really, we are all alike. The problems don't change with the generations, only the scene, only the vocabulary. Is there such a thing as peace of mind? Is there any cure for guilt? Are prayers ever answered? Can God really change a person? How does he do it? What sort of commitment is required? And how deep is our involvement? What risk do we take? The questions are not profound, neither are the answers. You will not need any theological background to understand this book, and if you have picked it up expecting to find entertainment or involved philosophy or unique literary beauty, you will be disappointed. This is a book for the person in need, the person confused, the person defeated, the person at the end of his rope. A person who is sinking doesn't want oratory. He wants a lifeline. And that is what I want this book to be.